Hi everyone, my name is Marina Guzman. I'm going to be presenting my research project on the correlation between protesters' emotional state and sense of political efficacy. My mentor for this project was Dr. Eric Heberlig. So yeah, let's get started. Basically, the background. My research is basically based because my mentor and other professors went to the 2020 national conventions, the Democratic one and the Republican one, and they sent a survey to all protesters and basically asked a bunch of questions about their political views, more of their demographics, their emotions, etc., etc. It was like around 20 questions, and based on that survey, I began to create this research project, which basically connects emotions and political efficacy. For a little background, political participation and activism have historically demonstrated to be components that can shape the future trajectory of politics. As we can see, a bunch of protests and just social movements have shaped the way politics go and their trajectory. So I wanted to kind of analyze what makes people believe that they can change politics and their levels, so meaning political efficacy, and if there is any correlation with their emotions. So my main question was, to what extent do emotional experiences during protest influence individuals' sense of political efficacy within contemporary protest movements? My objectives focused on examining whether the intensity level of emotions correlate with the intensity level of perceived influence towards political groups, and to identify which emotions have the strongest correlation towards high political efficacy. For the first objective, I said political groups, and later on my poster you can observe the number of groups that there were. But to be understood easier, basically I added all of those groups together to make one variable, which is the total influence. Instead of analyzing each group by itself, I created a variable which was total influence. So yeah, which leads to my method. Basically, the study draws the data collected, as I said, from the survey, and I focused on a variety of variables, but the two main were emotions experienced during the protest events. The second one was perceived likelihood of their message influencing their intended political audience, which is political efficacy. And to understand the relationship better, or to instead make it clearer so there are no misrepresentation of the correlation, I added a variety of control variables, which were political attitudes, protest experience, activist identity. I also added within political attitudes, I added the questions that were do you think that you're being heard? I believe that politics have something can be changed and has something to do with progress, questions like that, better understanding participants. So yeah, I utilized that data with SPSS, which is an app, and I basically did 3 analyses, which were descriptive statistics, correlation analysis, and multiple linear regression, to test basically the prediction of power of emotion on political efficacy while accounting for control variables. I really wanted to focus on seeing a clear correlation and not having other controlled variables be the reasoning for such relation. So that's why I'm always repeating on control variables. On this small table that we can see, I listed all the emotions that were included in the survey, and on the other side it says the likely influence on. That is the political efficacy on certain political groups. I did not analyze based on political groups. I did a total influence, like I previously said. But yeah, I just wanted to list them out so people could understand what were these political groups. The second image we could see below that is the survey itself. This is a picture I took of the survey, and it's like the first question, which is the one that I'm actually using. Unfortunately, I couldn't show the whole survey, but yeah. So based on that analysis, I got the following results and conclusions. So my main conclusions were that hope during the protest and political intensity, which in another word is enthusiasm, were the most consistent emotional predictors when it came to political efficacy. And total target was the importance of being heard. That was one of my control variables, was the strongest overall predictor of political efficacy, which does make sense. The importance of being heard and the likely influence on a political group were two questions that were closely related, but I really wanted to add that control variable so we could see that, so I could kind of separate it from the emotions and see if emotions were stronger than the importance of being heard. But well, clearly that was the strongest overall predictor. And feeling ignored by officials, that was another control variable. That one has a negatively affected efficacy because, again, if you're not being heard by officials and that's how you feel, and a lot of respondents answered to that, well, obviously it wouldn't correlate with political efficacy, because if you don't believe that you're being heard, then you probably don't think that you can create change. Below that conclusion, we can see a table. Basically, I pasted the SPSS Pearson correlation results. On one of the columns, I put the interpretation so people could see emotion by emotion on how it correlated. Obviously, the first two I already mentioned, which was enthusiasm and hope. And the last one was surprise. Surprise was basically, it had no correlation towards political efficacy. So yeah. And to conclude, the findings of the study say that emotions matter, especially hope and intensity. Protesters who feel hopeful and engaged and enthusiastic with political life report higher political efficacy. Protest itself can serve as an emotional activating space that enhances people's beliefs and their capacity to make a change. But obviously, perceptions of being ignored by public officials kind of just diminish the whole belief by itself. Future work should further explore how different protest environments and emotional climates influence democratic participation and empowerment. I would like to include that I was really influenced, or rather inspired, by a certain Yale research that I added on my references, because the whole study is based on the importance of emotions in the whole democratic scene. I was really inspired by this study. I think it's important to understand that emotions do play a huge role in political efficacy and how the country can be shaped. Obviously, there are a bunch of variables that do shape political efficacy, especially the situation the protests are in. For example, I did start thinking about, what if this protest wasn't the National Convention, but what if it was the Black Lives Matter protest during 2020? How would the results would have differed to these? One of the things that I made sure of was the control variables. One of them was making sure that people weren't feeling targeted by police, because sometimes that can be something that diminishes, or rather lowers, emotions and their influence on efficacy. So yeah, I checked it out. It obviously didn't have any influence on the correlation, but again, it's kind of like the situation and the protest type, and obviously the time. Sometimes protests are more aggressive. This was, according to the data, a more peaceful protest, and yeah. So again, this was the situation where the protests were at. It was peaceful. Political violence wasn't a thing. It was a peaceful protest. So I would conclude that my results gave rather the best outcome, the best situation to analyze if emotions were indeed a factor that influenced political efficacy or not. And yeah, thank you for listening and have a good day.